and I finally succeeded. Thank you, Tzvi.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Shalom, and all the organizers. This year is dedicated by the Gantavnik family in memory of Abe and Zina Gantavnik, of blessed memory, and in honor of the recent bat mitzvah of Eva Gantavnik and the bar mitzvah of Nathanael Gantavnik. Welcome. This year is empowering students in learning Tanakh, and I don't want to talk about it, I want to do it. Toch Kedei doing it, hopefully everybody here will learn a little bit about what my concept of one concept that I have of empowering students is. There are lots of different ways of doing it. This is one little slice of a much bigger picture. I had debated what to learn together with you, and when I spoke with Shalom a while back, I came up with one text, and then just this week I said, no, I need to switch it to something that we just read. Just a few days ago in the Parsha, and I'd love it if you could all learn with me. If you have a Tanakh in front of you, that's amazing. If you don't, you can open up your computers, your phones, whatever it is, and we have a few Tanakhim up here for those who like old-fashioned stuff, like in paper. I want to open up to Sefer B'Midbar Sinai, Perek Lamed Beit. It's one of my favorite passages in the Torah. I also love teaching it to people from the Northern Hemisphere because very few people are familiar with it because it comes out in the summertime and nobody pays attention during the summertime. When I go to the Southern Hemisphere, everybody learns it in school. Okay. So I'm going to open with a very brief introduction. There's a story here that many of us are probably hopefully familiar with, the story of Reuven and Gad. We'll talk about, if you have time, we'll talk about Chatzi Shevet Menashe at the end. Reuven and Gad who want to get land on the eastern side of the Jordan River. When Hashem gave the Gvulot to Bnei Yisrael, their goal, their destination was the western side of the Jordan River. They were never aware that they would ever get land on the eastern side of the Jordan River. That came about by fluke, well, at least from their perspective, by fluke. Sichon Melech HaEmori wouldn't let them pass through and attacked them, and they fought back, and they ended up destroying Sichon and Og, the two most mighty kings in the entire region, had repercussions all throughout the region, and they ended up with a lot of extra land. Okay, so Reuven and Gad say we like that land. So here's the structure of the Perek. Okay, there are really 4 parts to it, and hopefully we'll get to all 4 parts today. The first part is the request. The second part is Moshe's initial response. The fourth part, I skipped number 3. The fourth part is what eventually happens. And the third part is how we get from Moshe's initial response to what eventually happens. I'm going to give you a summary of that. It goes like this. After Moshe's initial response, they make a proposal. Moshe accepts their proposal. They accept Moshe's acceptance of their proposal. Moshe accepts their acceptance of his proposal. Moshe presents their acceptance of his proposal. No, he presents their acceptance of his acceptance of their acceptance. All right, you got the idea? Until finally, in the end, right, we get to what actually happens. That is absurd. When you read the story, that is what it sounds like. It's absurd. Nothing in the Torah is written that way. Actually, it's not true. Where else do you find? Because usually, by the way, when Moshe has a conversation with Paro, right, just imagine. So, Paro says something, Moshe says something, Paro responds. How long does it take to read that? 2-3 psukim? Most of those conversations are 2-3 psukim. How long does it take to read 2-3 psukim? A minute? How long do you think the conversation actually was? Was it a minute? Probably a lot longer than that. Yeah, right? Talking to a king, whatever it is. And I imagine they weren't speaking in Hebrew. So what do we have in the Torah? We have the bottom line. The Torah takes, what was the essence of what Moshe says? What was the essence of Paro's response? Gamarnu. Right? That is the way conversations are usually recorded in Torah. But every once in a while we have something where the conversation we have A, B, A, B, A, B. Right? And what's going on when it happens rarely. Like, anybody know of any other place where you have two sides and there's a back and forth? They keep going back and forth. Avraham buying Marat HaMachpelah. Right? It should have just said, can I buy it? Yes, you can. Here's the money. Gamarnu. There's a back and forth here. And what back and forth means is there's a negotiation.
Avraham and Sodom.
Avraham and Sodom. Same thing. There's a negotiation with Hashem. And then what you need to do is you need to say, okay, exactly what it is that we're negotiating about. Right? What you just came up with, to the best of my knowledge, the only other two places in the Chumash where you have this. Right? Yeah? That's interesting. And it does follow that. I'm not convinced that it's negotiation, but you could certainly read it that way. Right? Eved Avraham. No, he presents, they listen, and it's done. Right? It's just the Torah repeats it, right? But the dialogue is really very simple. He has a long dialogue. They have a very short dialogue, and then
they ask her. They ask her.
They ask her, but the dialogue is basically he presents his side, they present their side, and the story's done. They don't keep coming back again and again. So here also that Yitro and Moshe. Okay, so we have a few examples, right? This is one of the ones that is most bullet, and we're going to have to read through it and try to figure out exactly what's happening over here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at this a little bit later. We'll come. Don't worry. We'll come to this. We're learning here from the Chumash. We're not learning from a screen. I'm going to use this just to show how some tools can be really, really powerful, and how you can empower your students to use those tools. Okay. Now I just want to step back for a second. What did I just do? From an educational perspective, what did I just do? Engage you. Okay? I'm trying to draw you in. Set induction. Right? There are fancy words for it. I created some kind of a puzzle. Right? The puzzle was, I told you, parts 1, 2, and 4. And you're sitting there scratching your head and say, what happened to 3? I'm going to spend some time on 3. So we'll come back to that. All right? So now we have a big picture of what we're doing here. We're going to be reading through an entire parak of Chumash today. Let's start at the beginning of parak Lamed Beit. So we have this setting, right? The setting is the first 4 psukim. Okay? So if you have your Chumashim, parak Lamed Beit, Sefer B'Midbar Sinai, look at the first 4 psukim, and tell me what word jumps out at you. Okay, let's give everybody else a chance to catch up to those who are reading quickly. Okay, so the word miknei, right? 4 times. 4 times in the course of 4 psukim. It's the opening word. It's the closing word. It's the opening word of the first pasuk and the closing word of the first pasuk. Right? It sets the stage. This story is about sheep. That's what the story is about. It's mikneh. Okay. So I'm just going to read this. Okay. Umikneh Rav haya livnei Reuven v'livnei Gad atzum ma'od. Oh. I'll come back to that pasuk in a minute. Vayehu et Eretz Yazer v'et Eretz Gilad. These are the places on the eastern side of the Jordan River. V'hinei hamakom makom mikneh. They looked, they saw, we have sheep. That's good for sheep. Vayavohu v'nei Gad u'v'nei Reuven vayomru al Moshe ve'al Elazar HaKohen ve'el nisiyei ha'edel lemor. So they come to Moshe and the whole leadership of Am Yisrael, and they say, Atarot v'divon v'yazer v'nimra v'cheshbon ve'el alei u'sevam u'nevo v'on. We have a list of places. Haaretz asher yikah Hashem lifnei adat Yisrael eretz miknehi v'la'avadecha mikneh. Okay, so the mikneh frames the opening pasuk and it frames what they say at the end. What's missing? What? There's no request. And there's a stop right there. How do I know there's a stop right there? Number one, there's a parsha break. Number two, there's another vayomer, right? There's a vayomru right afterwards. Whenever you see that vayomer and another vayomer, right, with the same person talking, it means that there's a break in between. So here's the scene. I'm just going to act it out. Reuven and Gad come to Moshe. Hey, that land, that land, Hashem helped us conquer that. We weren't expecting that land. So Eretz Yisrael was divided up 12 ways. We weren't expecting it. That land is good for sheep. We have a lot of sheep. What was supposed to happen in that pregnant pause? What?
Moshe was supposed to say, I have an idea.
Moshe was supposed to say, oh, I have a brilliant idea. Why don't you take that land and we can divide up the rest of it 10 ways instead of 12 ways? Win-win for everybody. And Reuven and Gad is sitting there saying, and after that pause, right? Vayomru, right? They do make the request, but they were hoping that they wouldn't have to. They were hoping that Moshe would sort of offer it. Vayomru, im matzanu chen beinecha yutanet haaretz hazot la'avadecha la'achuza. We like this land, please. Al ta'virenu et hayardei. We'd like to stay here. This is a good place. Okay. Now, on the face of it, right? It sounds like a great plan. It's a reasonable request. We're going to get, everybody else is going to get more than they would have gotten otherwise. And we have this land which otherwise would have gone to waste because nobody else is being here and we weren't expecting to get this. We'll go there. Sounds like a perfectly reasonable request. What follows is the longest speech that Moshe gives outside of Sefer Devarim. What follows is the fiercest speech that Moshe gives in Chumash. So take a minute and just read through the rest of that keta from pasuk vav until pasuk tedvav, and you'll see what I mean by the fiercest speech. Okay, what makes this a fierce speech? Nachlio?
He calls them Tarbut Anashim Chatayim. He's going on and a rant about,
Okay, Tarbut Anashim Chatayim. By the way, the word Tarbut, what does it mean? And that's in modern Hebrew.
Not culture. Modern Hebrew.
In modern Hebrew, it means culture. What does Tarbut mean in Tanakh? Now, here, we come to these words. You know Hebrew. Sometimes our students don't know Hebrew as well. But the word, I was curious. What does Tarbut mean in Tanakh? Well, guess what? I happen to have a very handy-dandy dictionary here. Not only a dictionary, but it's also a very handy concordance. And I open up. Are you familiar with Al HaTorah? For those who aren't familiar, alhatorah.org. It's unbelievable, and what you can do with it is really unbelievable. I'll show you a couple of different things. Okay? So alatanach.org, I go down here to the concordance. Okay? And I'm going to type in the word tarbut. Let's look at that. It appears once in all of Tanakh. Aha.
Very cultured. Very cultured.
So, how on earth do we know what the word tarbut means? So I'll click on the Milon, and this is interesting. The shoresh comes from the word Rav. Tarbut is a very modern, probably Eliezer ben Yehuda word. But over here, it means tarbut anashim, a cult, an increase or a brood, right, of anashim chataim. Interesting. It's a little thing. But I had a student this year who learned how to use the concordance. And he had his laptop in the shiur, and every single time he came to a word he didn't know, he looked it up. He looked it up in the BDB, and he looked it up in the concordance. And he was empowered. He was our linguistics person in the shiur. It was unbelievable. I'll show you another word that comes up in this section. It actually comes up 2.5 times. And you'll see what I mean by 2.5 times. All right? Now, again, I just threw out a riddle. What the heck is 2.5 times? Okay, so that's to get you interested. That doesn't empower the student. It helps to draw them in. But let's do this. And the word is vayani'u, or lahani. Let's see if the word lahani comes up. Let's go into the concordance for the word lahani. Or how does it come up over here? Tini'un. Lama tini'un. Now, there's no shorish tini'un, so let's go to the tzura. Because you can actually look up, if you don't know the shorish, and this is beautiful, because students don't know the shorish, neither do I. So if you don't know the shorish, everybody here knows the shorish of tini'un, right? So assuming that you're one of the minority like me who doesn't know the shorish, I can actually look up the word exactly as it is, and it will tell me how the shorish is nun, vav, aleph. That's really cool. Okay? And your students can do this. Every time they come to a word, they don't know what it means. Instead of asking you what it means, you can empower them to do that, and now they can be empowered to do a little bit of research. Oh my goodness, this word appears 9 times in all of Tanakh. Not a very prominent word, and in fact, 9 times isn't really 9. Oh my goodness, this is really scary. The first 6 times are in Chumash, or first 7 times are in Chumash, and they all come from Parashat Matot. Look at this. Here's Parashat Matot. 5 and 6 is actually only 1. This is a mistake, because it counted the Kri and the Ketivas too.
You can email them, they'll fix it. You can email them, they'll fix it.
I know. So 6 times in all of Chumash. And every single one of them is in Parashat Matot. The beginning is Imheini Avi Ha'ota Tarat Nidarim. Hafarat Nidarim. And then you get the end of Parashat Matot, and then you begin to ask questions like, is the Torah trying to tell us something here? This word in Chumash appears only in this parasha in 2 different contexts. In the opening section of the parasha, not that the parasha means something, but the opening section and the closing section, there's got to be something going on over here. All right, figure it out. I'll send my students home. Go think about this. Go talk to each other and think about this. Empowering? Can they be wrong? Can they be right? Who knows? But what's more empowering for students to come up with an idea that could very possibly be right? And there's no way to really know if it's right or wrong. Because if it makes sense, then it's not wrong. So if you want to talk about empowering students, we've just done that incredibly. Okay, but let's get back. This is just a little sidetrack. Let's get back to our main story over here. So somebody said, your tarbut, we got onto this from tarbut, your tarbut anashim chataim, right? Whatever tarbut happens to mean, culture, if we're reading this through modern eyes, or brood, or, just you're increasing, you're people who increase, right? Anashim chataim. But Moshe does more than that. He accuses them of being the second coming of the Meraglim, which is the worst thing you can say to anybody at the end of 40 years in the Midbar. He says, you want to do that all over again? Really? After 40 years, that's what you want again? So that's his main attack. In addition to his main attack, there is another small challenge that he gives them right in the very beginning. It's his opening line. What's Moshe's opening line in his response? Which is, "Ha'chechem yavo la'milchama v'yatem teishvu po?" Really? How could that be? So Moshe, first of all, accuses them of betraying their brothers. And remember, these are the same brothers who just helped conquer the land of Sichon and Og. So you're betraying your own brothers, the ones who helped you, and you're betraying all of Am Yisrael, you're betraying all of Jewish history. You're doing this all over again. Right? That's his opening attack. A few minutes ago, we suggested that the request was not so absurd. It's win-win. They get land, you get land, everybody. The land is going to be, if we don't get it, it's just going to sit there. So what are you going to do with it? You're going to rent it out? It's a huge tract of land. So the request is not an absurd request. Yeah. Right? You have to settle it with somebody, right? So the request is not an absurd request at all. Which then raises the question for us of why is Moshe overreacting? Okay. And that prepares us for the main work that we have to do here. And the main work that we have to do is actually, well, this ends at 4? This year ends at 4? You let me know. Okay. 2:45. 10 to 4. We're good. So our main work is going to be focusing on that section number 3 that I skipped earlier, right? And let's dive in. All right. So here we have the first stage. Vayigshu vayomru. This is pasuk Tedvav or Tedzayin. Sorry, pasuk Tedzayin. Vayigshu vayomru. Gidrot zon nivne lemiknenu po. V'arim letapenu. Okay, we have an idea. Here's a plan. Let's build places for our sheep, fenced-in places for our sheep, and cities for our children. Va'anachnu nechaleitz chushim. And if I wanted to, I might look up the word chet lamed tzadi. Right? Because what does that word mean? I mean, we all know what chalutzim are, because we've all learned the history of the 20th century. Let me just look this up. What does the word chalutz mean? And is this the first time it appears in the Torah? Let's just check. Chet lamed tzadi. Whoa, I did not do that right. Lamed tzadi. And let's go to shoresh. No, it didn't like that. So we'll do it again. Chet lamed tzadi. Ein shoresh kazeh b'Tanakh. It wants a space. It wants a space. Okay. So we play. Here we go. Chet lamed tzadi. Oh. This is interesting. This word appears a few times earlier in Sefer Vayikra. But look at this. Here we go. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh my goodness. 9. Like the place where this appears the most. Oh my good. From source 3 through number 11 is from this story. And then the only other time, or there are a few other, the only 2 other times it appears in all of Chumash, we have Dvarim referring to this story, and Chalitza. Okay. Curious students? Anybody want to follow up on this? You find where it appears. Is there a connection? Do they mean the same thing? Is there a connection between the meanings? Is there a connection between the contexts? Okay? Go think about that. Come back. Tell me. Empowering your students. Okay. Let's just continue. Right, we're in the middle of reading. I keep interrupting with all these things, right? Empowering students and learning. Here we go. ויקשו אליו ויאמרו, גדרות צאן נבנה למקננו פה וירים לטפנו ואנחנו נחליץ חושים לפני בני ישראל. And I could have done the same thing for the word chushim. Ad asher im havionum el mekomam, until we bring them to their place. V'yashav tapenu bi'arei ha'mivtzar mipnei yoshvei ha'aretz. Lo nashuv el batenu ad itnachel b'nei Yisrael ish nachlato. Ki lo ninchalita me'ever le'yarden v'hala. Ki va nachlatenu elenu me'ever yarden mizmacha. We'll be on the east side, they'll be on the west side. But in the meantime, we're going to make sure that everybody gets settled in. Okay. Which of Moshe's concerns did they just address? Moshe had two. They responded. They said, "No, chas v'shalom. We would never consider abandoning our brothers. What Jew would ever let somebody else go to war while they sit back home?" Okay, they addressed the first concern. Did they say anything about the second concern?
By not caring about the land, like not wanting to go in.
Right, meaning Moshe accused them of being a second coming of the Meraglim.
So they responded to that. They said, we're going to be chalutz lefnei hamachaneh. It's not that Moshe's afraid that everyone else is going to want to stay there because apparently it's too scary to go in there, like what the Meraglim said. They said, no, we're going in front. We're going to lead the battle. Everyone's going to follow us, and we're not going to go home until they're settled. So there's no Meraglim.
Yafeh. So let's see how Moshe responds to this. Right? Because you're saying that they responded to both of Moshe's concerns. Let's see what Moshe, right? We know what Moshe's response should be if you're correct. Right? What should Moshe's response should be?
If it was only about those two requests, then they've addressed them.
Right, should have said shkoyach. Wow, I feel much better now. We have a deal. It sounds like that. When people read this the first time, or when they read it the first time every year, it actually sounds like Moshe says, great idea. ויאמר להם משה, אם תעשו את הדבר הזה, אם תחלצו לפני השם למלחמה, ועבר לכם כל חלוץ את הירדן לפני השם, עד הורישו את אויביו מפניו, ונכבשה הארץ לפני השם, ואחר תשובו והייתם נקיים מהשם מישראל, והייתה הארץ הזאת לכם לאחוזה לפני השם. So if you do what you said, right, then great, you get this land. V'im lo ta'asun kain, but if you don't do what you said, hinei chatatem la'Hashem, know that you're bad boys. U'du'u chatatchem asher timsa etchem, and you should know that your sin is going to catch you. V'nu lachem arim etapchem u'gderot lesona'achem v'hayosei mipichem ta'asu. Okay. Does Moshe accept their proposal or not?
Yes, but
What do you mean?
Well, it's not like okay. It's a very pragmatic solution. It's Nakiim and Chatatchem, meaning it's like, if you do this, then from a seemingly a legal perspective, you're off the hook, but if not, then you have sin.
Okay.
Which also stylistically matches the phrase from Matot, where it uses the same lashon as Nadarim of Nakim and Chet, and also the lashon of the language of Tniun, which also correlates back to Matot.
Yeah, so you're tying this right back into the language
it's good
there.
because they're both the in-between bookends of Parshat Matot, and the Chalitza, that's also the point, is breaking the unspoken obligation or bond between two members that have to know each other as well.
Yafeh. Okay, so we got not only an answer to the question, but we got a whole share in the process. Yafeh.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You tied a lot of the pieces together. But aside from the fact that sounds like he adds a couple of little things. Does it sound like he accepts their proposal? Okay, let me bring some
important change in their
proposal, which is their original request was Al Tavi Reinu et Hayardain,
right?
And even when they say they're going to go, they don't use the word over. They say Nechaletz Chushim, and Moshe says no, only you have to be over. You can come back, But you have to be over at Hayarden.
Fair. I want to bring up just the text over here, and I'm going to show you just a little trick. If you've used Allah Torah before, then you know this trick. If you haven't used it, your eyes are going to pop out of your head. Okay? Here we are. We're in Sefer B'Midbar Sinai, Perek Lamed Beit, and we're looking at Moshe's response, and Moshe's response is starting with Pasuk Chaf. Here we go. And ending with Pasuk Chaf Daled. Okay, 4 Pasukim. Okay, I'm not going to show you all the different things over here. I'm not a salesman for Allah Torah, but I'm just going to show you just one of the really powerful things that you can do here. As I just move my mouse over the words, so the word lights up in red, and I get to a word like this. Okay, this word appears 3 times in this passage. Im ta'asun, 3 times in this passage. Hadavar, im techatsu, twice in this passage. Lifnei, oh my goodness, 5 times. Hashem, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. What's going on over here? What does Moshe introduce that they did not? Lifnei Hashem. Right? Your accountability is not just because to that they already responded. Right? They said, well, no, we'll do that. Right? Lo nashuv el batenu adit nachel b'nei Yisrael lishnachlato. Okay? Nechales chushim lifnei b'nei Yisrael. We have a responsibility to b'nei Yisrael. But what about Moshe turns back to them and says, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to amend this a little bit. And the main amendment, the one that comes up 6 times in the course of 4 psukim. 4 or 5 psukim. Right? Lifnei Hashem. V'tem nikiyim Hashem Yisrael. Lifnei Hashem. It's not Lifnei b'nei Yisrael. Moshe changes Lifnei b'nei Yisrael to Lifnei Hashem. They said, Nechales chushim Lifnei b'nei Yisrael. Moshe says, you got to go Lifnei Hashem. So Moshe adds a whole new dimension. Right? Which means that on some level, Moshe was a little bit concerned over here about their motives. Why is it that you don't want to go there? So at first he challenged their motives about, and accused them of being the second coming of the Meraglim. The first one they certainly responded to. The second one maybe they responded to. And now Moshe goes and says, wait a minute, there's something else we haven't addressed yet. What's your responsibility to God? Okay. Well, if you open up your Chumashim, starting with Pasuk Chafei, what sounds like their acceptance of Moshe's acceptance of their proposal is actually something very different than that. Right? Because what do they say? Vayomer b'nei Gad u'bnei Reuven al Moshe lemor, avadecha yasu kasher adoni mitzaveh. We will do exactly as you instruct. Tapenu nashenu miknenu v'chol behem tenu hiyu sham be'arei hagilad. Okay, they're going to stay behind. By the way, there are other minor changes, right? The things that you picked up on, all those other words, and there are others. There are other minor changes also, including, by the way, something that Rashi picks up on, the order of sheep first, right, or children first. They said sheep first. And now we understand why they said sheep first. Because this is all about the mikneh. And Moshe is trying to reorient them. He says, I know you're all about the mikneh, but you shouldn't be. You should put your children first. Right? Meaning, it's clear this is all about the mikneh. The Chumash says so. Right? And so they do that. They make that change. Pasuk Kavav, Tapenu, Nashenu, and then Miknenu v'chol behemtenu. Right? Yusham b'arei hagilad, v'avadecha yavru kol chalutz tzava lifnei Hashem la'milchama. That's the 7th one. Right? So they accept Moshe's amendment. They said lifnei b'nei Yisrael, and now they say they accept Moshe's amendment lifnei Hashem. Okay? So now it sounds like, okay, they accepted for sure their responsibility to Bnei Yisrael. They accepted for sure the responsibility to Hashem. Not clear what their relationship to this whole business of the Meraglim is, right? Because the Meraglim is to an extent about rejection of Eretz Yisrael.
So
Right?
fear.
Hmm?
You aren't also about fear.
Right, but the real issue that Moshe was bothered by was that Am Yisrael, those 10 guys stirred up the camp so that Am Yisrael rejected Eretz Yisrael. They said, we can't go there. And Moshe is afraid that this group might cause the same thing to happen all over again. Right? And we're not sure if they've actually addressed that. Right? If they've addressed the issue of the rejection of Eretz Yisrael. And what I want to do is I want to just, before we go any further, I want to just frame this. I'm going to step out. By the way, everything that I've done here, right, we've done together. You can do this with your students. It'll take you more than 40 minutes to do it with your students, but you can do this with your students. Everything that you found, your students can do the same thing. Every tool that we've used, your students can do the same way. And you can empower them to find things that they can go and figure out and research on their own. And come up with their own thoughts, their own suggestions. Every one of them can give their own shir on this. On the word vayandiu, and by the way, I said 2.5 times. It comes up 2 times, vayandiu. There is another half time. The word vayani'u with an ayin appears in that same passage. There's a word play. There's a word play going on in there. Right? So 3 times, it's actually 20, right? It's not the same word. And aleph and ayin are certainly not pronounced the same way. And yet, you can't avoid the fact that in this one passage, the word vayani'u appears, or lahani appears twice, 2 of the 6 times that it appears in all of Chumash. And then vayani'u with an ayin appears in there also. It's not an accident. It's an extraordinary play on words. Okay, so it's right there. Yes?
Something that I wonder about when I read this section, that just I find very striking, is that Moshe so badly wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael. And here they're like, oh, we're good, no thanks. So I don't know if that plays a role in Moshe's reaction or not, but it seems to be a relevant piece to the picture.
Great. It certainly could be relevant because Moshe can't believe that there's anybody who has the opportunity to go in and is not taking it. It blows his mind. That's the only thing he wanted at the end of his life.
I guess side by side with that is that they weren't looking just for a place to settle. They were going to, the whole purpose of all this was Eretz Yisrael. So requesting something that's not that is hard to kind of understand the context of the whole narrative.
Yafa. I'd love to take it.
Sorry, just a quick response to it.
Go ahead.
I wonder if that initial point that you raised where they start talking and stop talking indicates a certain hesitation that they were having in approaching Moshe about this because of that fact. Meaning they didn't want to they were raising the issue, maybe hoping that Moshe would respond, kind of hinting at it, and then they stopped, and then only when Moshe didn't take the bait or didn't whatever, that might be a piece of what's going on there. I don't know. That's just
Great. So before we move further in this parak, I just want to pause and go back a little bit because there was something else that they said, right? That I think you picked up on. That we sort of brushed over in our first reading. Right? And when you take a look back at it the second time, it triggers for Moshe something that's not only personal, but maybe much bigger than personal. Go back to their initial request. Pasuk Hey. There is one phrase in that pasuk that is unnecessary. Al ta'avireinu et hayardei. It's one thing to say, oh, I really like to live in Teaneck. Oh, I really love London. It's another thing to say, don't make me go there. Those words, those 4 words, were not necessary. But they said them. So if this was not simply, that's good land for us because we have sheep and that's good shepherding land. But we're rejecting that land. We have no clue what it is, but we don't want to go there. They hadn't seen the other side. Maybe the other side was even better. And that's a rejection of Eretz Yisrael, which could be what sparked Moshe in the first place to accuse them of being the second coming of the Meraglim. Now, there was a suggestion here that they actually addressed that. But take a look at the very, very end of their proposal. Their initial proposal. Take a look at Pasuk Yutet. What do you see there in Pasuk Yutet? Perspective? Yeah?
Something between a demand and a threat. Ba nachalatenu itam. We have it, it's ours.
Okay. And that is a reiteration of the rejection of Eretz Yisrael. Lo ninchalitam. We're not going there. I will go, but we're not staying there. That's not our future. Our future is here. Okay? So what Moshe may have picked up on, both on a personal level and on a national level, that touched off that really fierce response about Meraglim, well, they don't give up on that so fast. And here I just want to strengthen what you just said. Ba nachlatenu eleinu me'ever hayardein mizracha. What does that mean? What does that mean?
It's ours already.
It's ours already.
This land calls us.
Right? It's ours. Now, what that means is that when Moshe responds, he's not just making the amendment of Lifnei Hashem. He says, well, if you do this, then you're going to get the land. If you don't do this, you're not going to get the land. So if they get the land, when is it that they're going to get the land? Years in the future. You can leave your kids here, leave a deposit. It worked in Mitzrayim, right? Paro said, leave your kids behind. He was hoping that would draw them back. When Yosef and his brothers went to bury Yaakov, they left the women and children behind, right? That was to guarantee that they would actually come back. That Moshe is demanding the same thing. You leave them there, the guarantee, right? You can leave them there as a guarantee that you're going back, but you don't get the land now. I reject your rejection of Eretz Yisrael. The default is that you're going into the land. If you follow the rules the way I stipulate, the yes and the no, then and only then you're going to get the land. Okay. What we have, just to step back, okay, I'm going to paint a little bit of a theological picture over here, okay, and the theological picture looks like this. Moshe hears from them a rejection of Eretz Yisrael. He hears from them a rejection of Am Yisrael, and he suspects a rejection of Elohei Yisrael. Well, if you were to ask Rav Kook, he would tell you that those are the three pillars upon which our nation is built. Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and Torah Yisrael. If you were to go back into Sefer Breshit, Perek Yud Beit, you would discover Hashem tells Avraham to leave. Artzecha moladetecha and Beit Avicha. We're not going to go into a long share about them now, but they basically translate into the land, your peoplehood, and your religious values. And that same language you'll find every time you have somebody going through what looks like conversion. Yitro, you'll find the same language. Right? Ruth, you'll find exactly the same language. When Ruth asked Boaz, why are you so nice to me? And he says, because I know that you left. What's the language there exactly? Avich v'imech, right? Right? Yazat et avich v'imech, v'telchi Eretz moladetech. Eretz, moledet, and Av. The same exact term, thank you. Same exact terms that you find with Abraham. That's the formula. That's the formula for what it means to be who we are. If Moshe hears them rejecting the land, if he hears them rejecting the peoplehood, and he suspects that they're rejecting Elohei Yisrael as well, what does that mean? What does Moshe understand from them? They're seceding. Goodbye. Thank you. It's been a nice trip. We'll drop us off over here, and guys, it's been great. That's what Moshe hears from them. And that's what sparks the ferocity of Moshe's response. And what does he do? He starts negotiating. Well, let's start with let's move on to step after. Okay, we got that. I'm still hearing rejection of Eretz Yisrael. Let me hold off on that for now. What about Elokei Yisrael? Got that. Good. We're good for 2 out of 3. Now we read further. And you got to read this carefully. Okay? Let's do it together. Starting with Pasuk Kavchet. So Moshe hears their acceptance of Elokei Yisrael. He hears their acceptance of Am Yisrael, right? The brotherhood, right? The national responsibility. He's still hearing from them. And not sure if they've backed down from the rejection of Eretz Yisrael. Vayetzav lahem Moshe Elazar HaKohen v'et Yoshua min Pasuk Kavchet. So now Moshe says, let's bring this to a close. And he brings in all the leaders. Vayetzav lahem Moshe Elazar HaKohen v'et Yoshua ben-Nun v'et Rashi avot hamatot livnei Yisrael v'yom Moshe alehem. Im ya'avru b'nei Gad u'b'nei Reuven itchem et hayarden kol chalus l'chama lifnei Hashem. V'nich b'sha'aretz lifneichem. Right? So we have the 3 things. 1, the Tanai, if. Number 2, lifnei Hashem. And number 3, nich b'sha'aretz lifneichem. Those are the 3 core issues. There are a lot of other smaller issues in there, but these are the 3 that we keep coming back to. Then, unitatem lahem et eretz hagilad la'achuzah. Ve'im lo ya'avru chalutzim itchem v'nochazu b'tochachem be'eretz Kanaan. So what we thought was just Moshe's acceptance of their acceptance is not, because Moshe is drawing his red line in the sand now. I just mixed metaphors, right? He's drawing his line in the sand now. He said, that's it. This is my final offer. Okay? It's a Tanai. You don't get it now. Look at what the response is. Vaya'anu v'nei Gad u'v'nei Reuven limor, eit asher diber Hashem el avadecha kei naseh. Nachnu na'avor chalutzim lifnei Hashem eretz Kanaan. V'itanu achuzat nachlatenu me'ever layardei. Right? So they use the word nachala, but they say itanu. We're taking it with us. We got the deed already. It's ours. So Moshe drew his line in the sand and they drew theirs. He's negotiating with them. Are you going to be part of us or not? And they said yes, yes, no. He draws his line, they draw their line, and they're in 2 different places. And now you are the leader of Am Yisrael. It is a few weeks before your retirement. And this is the challenge that presented to you, and what decision do you make? Do you accept their final offer, or do you reject their final offer? Right? Now, again, I'm teaching this to students, whether high school students or post-high school students. At this point, I stop and I let them debate. Okay, and what do you think Moshe did? Let's change it from what do you think Moshe should do, but what did Moshe do? I don't know. Well, how are you going to find out? Continue reading. Take a look. This is, I think, the most extraordinary thing. I once taught this in Kent Moshava, and they got very angry with me. Pasuk Lamed Gimel. Vayitain lahem Moshe livnei Gad v'livnei Reuven v'lachatzi shevet Menashe ben Yosef et mamlechet Sichon melech Emori et mamlechet Og melech Bashan. He gave it to them. Not all tonight. He didn't wait for the next generation. He didn't wait for Yoshua and the Rashi HaMatot. Again, the Rashi HaMatot bringing us right back to the beginning of Parashat Matot. Right? He didn't wait for them 7 years later, 14 years later to no, there's no Tanai anymore. He gives it to them outright. We'll get there. We'll get there in just a second. He gives it to them outright. And when you take a look, every single time that the story is referenced in Chumash and in Sefer Yehoshua, it says explicitly that Moshe gave them the land. In Sefer Yehoshua, it's so clear because when Yehoshua goes to divide up the land, he says, look, I'm dividing up the land to the 9.5 Shvatim. Moshe already gave the 2.5 Shvatim their land. He didn't give it to them. He said, out of my hands. Moshe did that already. I'm just doing the other 9.5. Every single time that this comes up in Sefer Bamidbar again, in Sefer Dvarim, Natati, Sefer Dvarim, Perek Beit. The end of Perek, I think it's the end of Perek Beit. He says, I gave it to them. Natati. Moshe gave in. Here's the most extraordinary part of this. You know, you read Sefer B'Midbar Sinai. There are a lot of challenges that Moshe goes through. What's Moshe's usual response when he's challenged by Bnei Yisrael? Runs to the Mishkan, falls on his face, and waits for the Shekhinah to appear over the Olam Moed. This is the first and only time he doesn't do that. He does this on his own. You take a look at the Ramban will say, well, he did consult with Hashem, it just doesn't say it. Well, that speaks volumes if it doesn't say it. Every place else in the Sefer, it says it in such clear ways. This is the only place it doesn't say it. Moshe led these negotiations on his own. It's extraordinary. And what about Chatzi Shevet Menashe? So this is why I'm so excited. This is one of the reasons I decided to teach this instead of the other thing I was thinking about teaching. Because take a look at the way the closing of this story is framed. Vayitein lahem Moshe levnei Gad v'levnei Reuven lachatzi shevet Menashe ben Yosef, right? At Mamlechet Sichon melech Hamori v'Mamlechet Og melech Bashan, haaretz yareh b'gvulot arei haaretz saviv. And now we get the details of that. Vayivnu v'nei Gad. Oh, you hear the details of God. Et Divon v'et Atarot v'et Aroer v'et Atrot Shofan v'et Yazer v'Hod Baha v'et Beit Nimra v'et Beit Haran Arim Mifsav v'Gidrot Zon. That's what they got. So Moshe gave them that land, and they built it. Uvnei Reuven banu, right? So we have Gad and Reuven, right? Et Cheshbon v'et Elalei v'et Kiryatayim v'et Novo v'et Baal Ma'on Musabot Shem v'et Sivma v'Yikru v'Shemot et Shemot Ha'arim Asher banu. We're not going to go into the details there, but they did it. They built it. And where did Menashe come from? How did Chatzi Shevet Menashe get there? Because Pasuk Lamatet, Vayelchu b'nei Machir b'Menashe Gil'ada v'Yilkaduha. They went out. Chatzi Shevet Menashe went out. They conquered some more land. Land that wasn't conquered in the battle with Sichon and Og. They went and took more land. Vayoresh et ha'Amori asher ba. They chased out the Amori. And it's at that point, Vayitein Moshe et Hagil'ad l'Machir b'Menashe.
So like that was a shortcut to what we just saw here. Like, okay,
yes.
Once there's a party,
there's a precedent. Right? Now, once there's a precedent, so they decided to go on the foottails of the precedent. And by the way, if you're curious and you want to make this more interesting for your students, let's explore for a minute. And we don't have time to do this all together, but let's explore for a minute. Machir ben Menashe. Oh, that's a name that should be familiar to me from this Sefer. Slavchad ben Chefer ben Machir ben Menashe. And how does that story connect with this story? Right? Interesting. The two halves of the same family. One of which says, why should our father's name be erased from the land? And the other half says, let our father's name be erased from the land. We're going that way.
Taking this to the Yibum connection.
Now you can begin filling in all sorts of other stuff. And if you want to tie this back to Sefer Breshit, because everything has its origins in Sefer Breshit, this is the end of Sefer Breshit also. Gam b'nei Machir ben Menashe yuldu al berkei Yosef. The same b'nei Machir Menashe that we hear about here in Parashat Pinchas and Parashat Matot, connected back to there. Okay? I didn't tell you anything. I gave you breadcrumbs. You can go figure out any figuring that you want to do there. You come up with any interpretation. You can't be wrong. You might be right. What is more empowering for a student than the ability to come up with their own interpretation? What's more empowering for a student than to be able to solve a riddle? Like, why is this repeating itself so many times? And all you have to do is sit there, number one, and read the Chumash with them. Or let them read the Chumash on their own and give them some direction as to what to look for. Or give them a tool like this and tell them, okay, look at these psukim. This is where Moshe responds to them, and see if you can find the differences. And you tell them, look it up on here, and just like use your mouse and scroll over and see what pops up. And let them figure that out for themselves. If I would have given you the directions, it would have taken another hour. Yes, it would have taken another hour. Big deal. But if you would have created that, you wouldn't forget that for the rest of your life. And if we want our learning of Torah with the students, I try to stay away from the word teaching. If we try to make our learning of Torah with the students, that we're learning together, if we want it to last them an entire lifetime, if we want them to connect to it in ways that are going to be visceral, it's not going to be because of the things that we tell them. It's going to be because of the things that they discover. And our job, okay, I'm a fellow discoverer. I happen to have navigated these waters beforehand. So I'm going to give you a map. But now I'm going to send you out to discover. And when you do that, they want to come back for more. And they're going to want to come back for more. They're going to want to do this again and again. They're going to find that it's meaningful. It's not just interesting, but oh my goodness, Reuven and God wanted to succeed, and Moshe, this is like the greatest act of leadership ever. He prevented secession without threats, without civil war, without violence, and without divine intervention. Because God knows that when He's gone, you might not have all those tools at your hand. Wow. This becomes a really powerful way for students to generate information, to generate understanding, and to generate meaning that's going to last them a lifetime. Okay, so I talk about empowering students. This is one approach. And not only the approach, but why is it so important to empower students in learning of Tanakh? Okay. And now, for the epilogue. Go back to the opening pasuk. The very opening pasuk of the story. And this is something also I had not noticed until 3 days ago. Rav ve'atzum. Sound familiar? Shmot Perek Aleph. Rav v'ahein am b'nei Yisrael, Rav v'atzum mimenu. What's Moshe hinting at? What's the Torah hinting at in terms of what B'nai Gad and B'nai Reuven were actually trying to do over here? And now you understand why Moshe accuses them of being a Meraglim.
I could have been epilogue with the parsha in
Yoshua.
In Yoshua.
Yeah. That's why I asked what time you have to finish. Yes. Because there also you have...
It all comes back.
It all comes back, and they're on the brink of a civil war. And the person who stops it was standing right there at this time. Yoshua was there, and Pinchas was there, right? Pinchas' father was part of this whole scene, right? And they stopped the civil war.
Found that they had a good mentor.
Okay.
But I think that challenge doesn't always gashut versus whether you can keep the spiritual level and the attachment to Eretz Yisrael, or whether your economic situation comes first.
So that's the second epilogue. The second epilogue is this is not the first time in the Torah that we see somebody moving eastward out of the promised land because of sheep. Lot is the first one. And he goes to this land, Moab. Right? Where's the second one? Esav. Esav leaves the land because he goes eastward. He goes to Har Seir. It's the same story. And both of them got written out of this Jewish story. Right? Elimelech, we talk about, right? Sefer Shoftim that comes up later on. Right? But if we're looking earlier in the Chumash, this is exactly the story. Right? And they are written out of the book. And that weighs on Moshe. Oh my goodness. What am I dealing with over here? Okay, thank you.